Okay, hi, we have Benedict Davies from Google. Hi.
Hello.
So can you tell us a little bit about the magic behind Google simple white interface, and can this be adopted in other startups and other UX designs?
Sure. So it's a good question. The classic Google white interface is something that people often take for granted. They just kind of assume it's very easy. Actually, it's very hard to make something that simple and pure that does the job that users want it to do. So it has to be really effective. It has to be really clear and pure as an experience. So although there may only be a few components on the page, we actually spend a lot of time and effort thinking exactly what those components should be, the relationship they have to each other, and the way the user will interact with them. So it's taken, I mean, if you look back over the history of, say, the Google search homepage, if you look over the last 10, 12 years, it's changed. And some of the very subtle changes, changes to the logo and so forth, changes to the positioning of words on the page. But each one of those are really strongly tested. So we're constantly measuring the success of every element on the page and seeing whether or not it's actually being as efficient as possible for our users.
Yeah.
In terms of whether or not it can be used as a template for other companies, I think that obviously it's part of the unique Google brand, the kind of clear white space, but I think there are a lot of learnings other companies can take from it. For example, at Google we have a mantra which is focus on the user. It's not just a slogan, it's something we believe in very heavily as a company. And I would advise any other company that was trying to improve their user experience to really start thinking about that. What is the user wanting to get out of this? It's not a question of how cool the technology is or which services we'd like to push to people. It's what can make the most beautiful, intuitive, simple user experience. And over many years at Google, we haven't perfected it, but we've come a long way along that journey ourselves of understanding how to make that pure and simple experience.
Yeah. So could you walk us through a typical UX design process?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
For a Google product?
So I was actually running a workshop on this here in Lebanon yesterday. So the typical process starts with a brief. So we have to try and understand what it is we're trying to do. And that brief could come from, for example, in Google we have 20% time where engineers can spend one day every week thinking about new projects. So maybe a brief will come out of an engineer's 20% time where he'll think, there's an opportunity to do something we're not doing or to radically rethink about the way we do something. Or it may come from the launch of a new piece of technology, like for example the rise of tablets nowadays makes it different opportunities. So anyway, we start with the brief. And once we understand what it is we're trying to do, we then invest heavily in research. So I'm a user experience designer and I work in a team with designers and researchers. And so those researchers will actually go out into the field and they'll try and understand as much as we possibly can about an issue. So who the potential users are, what they're currently using at the moment, what gaps, if any gaps there are in that experience, any ways that we can understand in greater detail how this product or service would fit into their lifestyle. And once we've done that research phase, we then move on to a very early design stage. So that could be something very simple like paper prototyping or just sketching out things on pieces of paper and just trying to understand the relationship between the pieces of information we're dealing with, how the service might flow together or how the product will interact with other products we may have. And then from that design phase, we'll go through some sort of prototyping, building phase, where we'll get some kind of working model going. And then we'll start testing again with users. So we'll go and find the same kind of focus group we were talking to in the first place and make sure it's the right kind of match of users and run the product past them and understand whether or not we're on the right track. If we understood the nuances of how the product's going to be used, is it intuitive enough? Have we understood, subtle things like wording, internationalization, is the language correct? And then we'll go round that circle, and it could be, many, many times around that circle of design, research, test, validate, until we think we've got a product that is robust enough, and at that point we'll launch it. And then post-launch, nothing ever is finished. You don't stop when you launch something. Post-launch, we then start analyzing the usage of the product and seeing, whether or not it's being used in the way we anticipated it was going to be used, whether or not we're seeing the level of uptake we expected to take, and we'll then start tweaking the product and seeing whether or not we need to make changes to it. And you sometimes get some very interesting things, like you can launch a product and you think it's going to do one particular task, and you'll leave it in the market for a couple of months, and all of a sudden you'll realize that actually people are using it for a completely different task, one you never anticipated, which is great, because then you can say, well, okay, that's not what we thought about, but it's useful. How can we now adapt the product to make sure it's really fulfilling that role, if that's the role that people have found it to be of value for?
Yeah. So we all know mobile is here to stay.
Yeah, and, absolutely.
The context of mobile is totally different than the context of the regular web.
Yeah.
How do you do the iteration in UX design in mobile?
Okay. So
how do you keep track on user behavior on mobile?
So it's in some ways it's much harder because the mobile ecosystem is not as well developed as the desktop one, and so there's less technology in place to actually measure how things are being used. But there are a lot of advantages to working in mobile, and I've worked in mobile for the last 15 years almost, ever since the very early days of WAP phones. And some of the advantages of mobile are that because it's a very personal device, because the device is person's own phone and they have it in their pocket. You see interesting behavior, like the mobile is the thing next to someone's bed, or it's people would sooner lose their car keys than lose their mobile phone, and it's an incredibly personal device, which allows us to have a much deeper understanding of how people use it than, say, a desktop computer where maybe 4 or 5 people are sharing it, or a laptop where it's not nearly as instantaneous. You have to take it out of your bag, you have to boot it up, whereas a phone is always there and much closer to people. So there are a lot of advantages around working on mobile, because you have that kind of much closer matching between the person and the device. And the technology for actually measuring how people are using mobile devices and understanding usage patterns is getting better. So it's not quite as good as desktop, but it's not far behind.
So we've seen the new version of Google Analytics. And how can startups leverage these new enhancements you do in Google Analytics to keep track on user behavior? Do you have any tricks?
So, there's a lot of things with analytics that are really powerful from somebody who's just starting out and is trying to develop their product and their proposition. For example, the ability to be able to do A/B tests, so to be able to show one version of a page to 10% of your audience and a different version to the other 90%, or 3 or 4 different versions. So it gives an environment where startup companies and people just beginning to understand who their users are can really quickly iterate on their design or their product offering. So that's one key area of analytics that's very useful.
So, getting more into details, what do you think? What do you think is a good practice for button size and position in any mobile application?
Okay, it varies slightly on the size of the screen and the resolution you're dealing with, but the thing you need to think about when you're designing for mobile is that it's obviously going to heavily be a touch interface, but it's also probably going to be an interface that people are using in a semi-distracted way. So you may be walking to the bus and you've got one hand with your shopping bag in it, and the other one you want to check your text message. So you have to design with a reasonable degree of tolerance in there, so that people can use the device with one hand. So in terms of the detail, things like you don't want to place buttons too close to one another. You want to give enough space, so if you are fumbling for the phone in your out of your pocket, you can easily press send without accidentally pressing delete. It's also thinking about the mobile is much more limited space. So it's thinking about how you can prioritize what the information is that you're showing to people. Make sure you're putting the most important functionality most clearly in front of people. and really consider whether or not a particular feature needs to exist on the interface in the first place, and if it does, what's the most intuitive way to present it? You know? So those would be the key areas I'd look at.
So do you cater to regional differences when rolling out UX improvements on products?
Yes, we try to. I mean, we have a whole team of Google work around internationalization issues, and so as much as we can, and it's an evolving practice. We're getting better at it. We try and be sensitive.
Do you have any examples?
So I work in a team called Emerging Markets, and we have certain products that we only target to particular places in emerging markets. So we have a product called Trader, which is a small ads, classified sales product, and we only have that in a limited number of countries. We have another question and answer product, which allows information to be crowdsourced within communities. Exactly, yeah. And that's available in certain parts of the MENA regions. But that's not a product that we would roll out in Europe, for example, because it doesn't really have the resonance with the users there. It comes back to what I was saying earlier about it focusing on the users. We try and understand what products can most help a particular region, and sometimes it's a global product like Gmail, pretty much useful globally, and sometimes it's a product that will help a particular country or a particular region.
So how about, let's talk about Apple products, Google products for Apple.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think Apple products for Apple are more prettier or more UX friendlier than the regular apps for Android?
Okay, so I don't think that.
Okay.
You think that.
Everyone thinks that.
Well, I don't. I think I would question the statement in the first place. I think what we're trying to do as a design team in Google is create products that fit with the platform as suitably as they can. I mean, personally, I think Android is a more powerful platform than iOS. I think it has more scope to actually reach a broader spectrum of users than the iOS platform does. And so we design products on Android that suit the capabilities of the platform. And like everything at Google, Android's an evolving work. So I would readily acknowledge the first version of Android, what was it, 4 or 5 years ago, was not as nearly as polished as the version we're running with now, the latest Jelly Bean release. So I think anyone that's kind of studying the progress of Android will see that the sophistication of the design language and the intuitiveness of the interface is a constantly evolving area, and one that the company invests a lot of time and effort in doing. The Apple products have a particular look and style to them, which has been very carefully designed to make them feel familiar and intuitive to users of Apple products generally. Going forwards, I think that Android is obviously an incredible growth platform. The chances of the majority of new users coming into the mobile space, particularly the users in emerging markets that I'm particularly interested in, a lot of those people, their first touch point to the internet will be via a mobile phone. And the chances are that mobile phone will be running Android. So we're very interested in making Android as an intuitive and beautiful an experience for those users.
So let's talk about branding and UX design.
Mm-hmm.
How can startups leverage UX in better branding for their
that's a good question. So I think one of the key areas is within every startup, every new company, is to have somebody in that company who is the user champion. There's got to be somebody that really cares about the user more than anyone else. And they're the person that should be looking at Google Analytics and seeing the patterns of usage across their app or their mobile app, whatever it is. And they should be the person that's advocating, going out there and talking to people. They should be the one that's trying to set up little, even their little rough and ready user studies, just get a few people in off the street, watch how they use the product, really understand about that. So I think if you have one person in the company that is that user champion, then you can start building that aspect of the brand. So the brand obviously has to operate across lots of different levels. You know, it has to be, the reliability of the product, and it has to be the focus of the product. But I think one of those aspects of the brand can quite happily be the care and attention you have to trying to deal with your users in the right way and give them the best experience possible. So by having this user champion within the company, then you start having a person within the management of the team who can constantly push that. Are we doing the best thing for the user? Are we rolling out this feature because we think the technology is great and we want to show off? Or are we rolling out this feature because we know we can really help people get a better experience or do something quicker or understand a wider range of content or allow them to express themselves more freely, whatever it is. And then you can start adding that into your brand values. And as you promote your brand externally, you can make that part of the brand language you're using.
So do you have any tips or pointers for UX designers in your area?
Yeah, absolutely. So focus on your users. You know, I've said this a couple of times already, but if you want to really create great products, you have to step away from what you think the great product should be, or what your boss tells you the great product should be, and actually go and speak to the people that are using the product. And once you can understand exactly what your users want, then the next tip I'd say is never be satisfied with what you've got. Even if you think you've done a very good job, and you may well have done, and you've designed something beautiful, then don't rest easy on your laurels. You know, start looking at how you can change it, how you can make it better, how you can adapt to the changing environment. Maybe there are different kinds of users coming online now, or maybe the technology, the interface or the tablet or the device, whatever it is changing. So never stay in one place. Always be looking ahead. And also, don't live in a bubble. You know, look around you. Look at what your competitors are doing. Be honest. You know, compare your product to what the competition is, and are they doing a better job? Does that kind of encourage you to do a better job in return? And if you start, taking on this, not just your immediate competitors, but also maybe somebody working in a totally different industry where there's not a direct relationship, but maybe they've done something really clever in the way they've designed their interface, and maybe you can learn from that, or maybe it gives you a inspiration to go and think about the way you design your own product.
So we all know Google Plus is here to stay, and it's going to be the next big thing, or it is the next big thing. So how are you going to integrate Google Plus with the user life?
So I think we're already doing a reasonable good job of that. Obviously we have further to go along that route. The point of Google Plus is that it's a layer that sits across all of Google products. So people sometimes make the mistake of thinking it's just a social network. It's actually much more than that. It's actually trying to provide a mechanism to allow a seamless experience across Google products. So, for example, to be able to get notifications in your Gmail of activities that are happening somewhere else. The whole circle model that underpins the way that you group people in Google Plus is also a mechanism that, if you have a YouTube account, can help you understand how you're sharing your videos on YouTube. So Google Plus is an evolving project, and it's by no means a finished project at the moment. But the advantages of it, I think, will be applicable to many people and apparent to those that start using it. But the key is to understand it as this kind of this layer that sits across everything.
So it's going to be injected on a regular YouTube user. He's going to be, without feeling that, he's going to be using Google Plus eventually.
Products, but it's definitely part of our overall direction that we're going in, is to make Google Plus a layer across things. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you, Ben, for your time.
Not at all. Thank you very much. It was lovely to meet you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben.